The sun was shining bright that Saturday morning as James Thompson drove into the shopping center parking lot. He'd just finished a long deployment overseas and was looking forward to picking up some groceries and heading home. After serving his country for 15 years as a Navy SEAL, all he wanted was a quiet weekend. He spotted an empty parking space near the store entrance and smoothly pulled his truck in. Just as he turned off the engine, he heard angry honking behind him. In his rearview mirror, he saw a silver sedan with an older couple inside, both of them looking furious. The man in the driver's seat, Bill Reynolds, rolled down his window and shouted, "Hey, we were waiting for that spot." His wife Martha sat beside him, shaking her head in disapproval. James stepped out of his truck calmly. He was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, nothing that indicated his military background. "I'm sorry, I didn't see anyone waiting," he said politely. But Bill wasn't having it. He got out of his car, his face red with anger. "Of course you didn't see us. You people never do," he spat, making it clear what he meant by "you people." Martha quickly pulled out her phone and started recording. "This is exactly what's wrong with this neighborhood," she said loudly, making sure others could hear. "They just take whatever they want." James took a deep breath. He'd faced far worse situations in combat zones, but this kind of hatred always caught him off guard, especially on American soil. "Sir, ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding," he tried to explain. "Don't you sir me." Bill stepped closer, his finger pointing aggressively. "I bet you don't even belong in this area. This is a nice neighborhood." By now, several shoppers had stopped to watch. Some looked uncomfortable, others curious. A few even had their phones out, recording the scene. "I live 3 blocks away," James responded, keeping his voice steady. "I've lived here for 5 years." "Sure you do," Martha sneered. "Probably on some government handout, right?" James felt his jaw tighten but remained composed. Years of military training had taught him to stay calm under pressure. "Actually, I serve in the United States Navy," he said quietly. "Huh." Bill laughed mockingly. "Now you're lying too. You expect us to believe that?" The situation was escalating quickly. Bill moved even closer, his face just inches from James. "I want you to move your truck right now, or I'll move it for you." A young woman nearby called out, "Sir, please calm down. He was here first." But Bill ignored her. "Stay out of this," he shouted back. Then, turning to James again, he growled, "Last chance. Move your truck." James stood his ground. "Sir, I'm asking you respectfully to step back. This doesn't need to get physical." "Oh, now you're threatening me." Bill's voice rose even higher. Martha continued filming, adding commentary about aggressive behavior and feeling unsafe. The irony wasn't lost on the growing crowd. Here was James, standing quietly with his hands at his sides, while Bill gestured wildly and shouted. Several people were now on their phones, but not just recording, some were calling security. "I'm not threatening anyone," James said calmly. "I'm just here to shop, same as you." But Bill had worked himself into a fury. His face was now bright red, veins bulging in his neck. "That's it," he shouted, and suddenly shoved James hard in the chest. James barely moved. His training kept him balanced, but more importantly, it kept him from reacting with force. He could have easily defended himself, but he knew that would only make things worse. "Please don't do that again," James warned, his voice still controlled but firmer now. The crowd gasped. Someone shouted, "Hey, that's assault." 2 security guards were now hurrying across the parking lot, having noticed the commotion. But before they could reach the scene, something unexpected was about to happen that would change everything. Bill's anger seemed to grow with each passing second. His face was now twisted with rage as he stepped forward again, pushing James harder this time. "I said move your truck," he shouted, his voice echoing across the parking lot. James stumbled back slightly but quickly regained his balance. His military training kicked in, but instead of fighting back, he chose to de-escalate. "Sir, I need you to calm down," he said firmly. "This isn't worth getting worked up over a parking space." Martha was still filming, her voice shrill as she narrated. "Look at him trying to intimidate my husband. This is unbelievable," she exclaimed, completely ignoring the fact that Bill was the aggressor. The crowd had grown larger now. An elderly man stepped forward, trying to intervene. Please, let's all just calm down, he said. It's just a parking spot. But Bill whirled around to face him. Mind your own business, he snapped. This is between me and him. James noticed Bill's breathing was becoming more labored, his face an alarming shade of red. Something didn't seem right. Sir, are you feeling okay? He asked, genuine concern replacing his frustration. Don't pretend you care, Bill shouted back. He raised his hand as if to push James again, but this time James gently caught his wrist. I'm not going to let you hurt yourself or anyone else, James said calmly. Please just take a breath. This only seemed to enrage Bill further. Get your hands off me, he yelled, yanking his arm away. Martha, call the police. He's attacking me. Martha fumbled with her phone, switching from recording to dialing. I'm calling them right now. This man is dangerous. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on the onlookers. Several people spoke up at once. Ma'am, your husband started this. We all saw what happened. That man hasn't done anything wrong. But Bill and Martha weren't listening. Bill's breathing was getting heavier, and sweat was beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. You think you can just come here and take whatever you want? Bill continued his tirade. People like you always. He stopped mid-sentence, his hand suddenly clutching his chest. James immediately noticed the change. Sir, are you all right? Bill tried to speak but couldn't form words. His knees buckled and he started to fall. In an instant, James's demeanor changed completely. All thoughts of the argument vanished as his emergency training took over. James caught Bill before he hit the ground, gently lowering him to the pavement. Someone call 911, he commanded, his voice now carrying the authority of someone used to handling crisis situations. Martha screamed, dropping her phone. Bill. Oh my God, Bill. She rushed to her husband's side, panic replacing her earlier hostility. Ma'am, I need you to stay calm, James said as he quickly checked Bill's pulse and breathing. The pulse was weak and irregular. He's having a cardiac event. I'm trained in emergency response. I can help him, but I need you to focus. The crowd watched in stunned silence as James positioned Bill flat on his back and began checking his vital signs more thoroughly. One woman was already on the phone with emergency services. Bill, please wake up, Martha cried, reaching for her husband. Ma'am, please step back and let me work, James said firmly but kindly. Has he had heart problems before? Martha nodded frantically. Yes, he has a heart condition. He takes medication. Bill's breathing had become extremely shallow and his pulse was fading. James knew he had to act fast. He's going into cardiac arrest. I need to start CPR now. Without hesitation, James began chest compressions, counting steadily as he worked. The same hands that Bill had tried to push away moments ago were now fighting to save his life. 1, 2, 3, 4. James counted rhythmically, his movements precise and controlled. After 30 compressions, he tilted Bill's head back and gave 2 rescue breaths. Martha watched in terrified silence, tears streaming down her face. The crowd had formed a respectful circle around them, many with their hands over their mouths in shock at the sudden turn of events. Come on, stay with us, James muttered as he continued compressions. Sweat was forming on his brow from the physical effort, but he didn't slow down. A woman from the crowd knelt beside Martha, putting an arm around her shoulders. The ambulance is on its way, she said softly. He's in good hands. James continued CPR with unwavering focus, his military training evident in every movement. The man who had shown such restraint in the face of prejudice was now demonstrating the true meaning of service and humanity. The sound of approaching sirens filled the air, but James didn't stop. He knew every second counted in situations like this. As he worked to save Bill's life, the parking lot fell completely silent except for his counting and the growing wail of the ambulance. The ambulance sirens grew louder, but James didn't break his rhythm. 28, 29, 30, he counted, sweat dripping from his forehead. He leaned down to give Bill 2 more rescue breaths, then immediately returned to chest compressions. Martha clutched her chest, watching helplessly as this stranger fought to save her husband's life. The same man they had insulted just minutes ago was now their only hope. Please, she whispered, please don't let him die. He's not going to die on my watch, James said between compressions, his voice steady and reassuring. "I've done this before, just keep talking to him." The crowd parted as two paramedics rushed through with their equipment. "What do we have?" the first one asked, dropping to his knees beside James. 65-year-old male, sudden cardiac arrest, James reported professionally. "No pulse when he collapsed about 3 minutes ago. I've been performing continuous CPR since then. His wife says he has a pre-existing heart condition." The paramedic nodded, impressed by the clear report. "Military?" he asked as they began setting up their equipment. "Navy SEAL, 8 years as a combat medic before that," James replied, not missing a beat in his compressions. "Want me to continue while you set up?" "Please," the paramedic said, pulling out a defibrillator. "You're doing great." Martha looked at James with new eyes. This man she had judged so harshly, accused of not belonging in their neighborhood, was a decorated serviceman saving her husband's life. The second paramedic gently moved Martha back. "Ma'am, we need some space to work. What medications does your husband take?" As Martha fumbled through her purse for Bill's medication list, the first paramedic prepared the defibrillator pads. "Clear," he called out. James immediately lifted his hands as the machine delivered a shock. Bill's body jerked, but there was still no pulse. "Resume compressions," the paramedic ordered, and James was already moving. His training had made these actions second nature. The crowd watched in awe. Several people were crying, touched by what they were witnessing. The security guards had arrived but stood back respectfully, understanding this was beyond their expertise. "I've got the medication list," Martha said, handing over a crumpled paper. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. The paramedics scanned it quickly. "Blood thinners and beta blockers. When did he last take them?" This morning," Martha stammered. "He never misses a dose." After another round of CPR and a second shock from the defibrillator, something changed. The heart monitor suddenly showed a rhythm. "We've got a pulse," the paramedic announced. "Weak, but it's there." James sat back on his heels, exhausted but relieved. His arms ached from the continuous compressions, but he barely noticed. All that mattered was the steady beat from the heart monitor. Martha let out a sob of relief. "Thank you," she whispered to James, her voice breaking. "Thank you so much." The paramedics quickly prepared Bill for transport, placing an oxygen mask over his face and starting an IV line. As they lifted him onto the stretcher, Bill's eyes fluttered open briefly. "Sir, you're going to be okay," James said, leaning over so Bill could see him. "You had a heart attack, but you're stable now." Bill tried to speak but couldn't manage more than a weak groan. His eyes, however, showed recognition and something else: shame. "We need to transport now," one paramedic said. "Ma'am, you can ride with us." Martha hesitated, looking at James. I don't know what to say." "Just go with your husband," James replied gently. "That's what matters right now." As the paramedics wheeled Bill toward the ambulance, Martha turned back one more time. "Which hospital?" James asked the paramedics. "County General," they replied. "I'll follow you there," James said without hesitation, "to make sure he's okay." Martha's eyes filled with fresh tears. "After everything why would you?" "Because it's the right thing to do," James said simply. The crowd began to disperse as the ambulance pulled away, lights flashing. Many people approached James, patting him on the back or shaking his hand. "That was incredible," one man said. "You're a hero," added a woman who had been filming the whole incident. James just shook his head. "I did what anyone with training would do, that's all." James arrived at County General Hospital 20 minutes after the ambulance. The emergency room was bustling with activity, but he quickly spotted Martha sitting alone in the waiting area, her head in her hands. She looked up as he approached, her eyes red from crying. "How is he?" James asked, taking a seat beside her. Martha seemed surprised to see him. "They took him straight to the cardiac unit," the doctor said. Her voice broke. "They said if you hadn't been there, if you hadn't started CPR so quickly." "He's going to be okay," James assured her. "The paramedics got his heart rhythm back. That's a good sign." Martha nodded, then reached into her purse. I need to say something." She paused, struggling with her words. "What we did to you today was horrible. There's no excuse for it. James sat quietly, letting her speak. Bill's been angry at the world lately, she continued. He lost his job 6 months ago, and we've been struggling. But that doesn't justify what we said, how we treated you. A nurse approached them. Mrs. Reynolds, your husband is stable now. The doctor would like to speak with you. Martha stood up, then turned to James. Would you come with me? Bill needs to see you're here. James nodded and followed her down the hallway. They entered a room where Bill lay in bed, connected to various monitors. His color was better, though he still looked weak. Dr. Chen, a cardiologist, was reviewing Bill's chart. Mrs. Reynolds, your husband had a major heart attack. If CPR hadn't been started immediately, we'd be having a very different conversation right now. Bill's eyes found James standing in the doorway, his face crumpled with emotion. This is the man who saved him, Martha told the doctor. Dr. Chen shook James's hand firmly. The paramedics told me about your actions. Your training and quick response made all the difference. Are you a medical professional? Former Navy SEAL, combat medic before that, James replied. Bill tried to sit up. Please, he said weakly. I need to talk to him. The doctor nodded. Just keep it brief. You need to rest. James approached the bed. Bill's eyes were filled with tears. I'm so sorry, he whispered. What I said, what I did. I was a terrible person. You were having a medical emergency, James replied. The stress probably contributed to your condition. No, Bill shook his head. Don't make excuses for me. I was wrong. Completely wrong. He took a shaky breath. I judged you based on nothing but my own prejudice, and you saved my life anyway. Martha took her husband's hand. We both were wrong. We've been so caught up in our own problems that we forgot how to treat people with basic decency. A nurse came in to check Bill's vitals. As she worked, James remembered something. Oh, I have your phone, he said to Martha, pulling it from his pocket. Martha took it, looking at the screen. The video was still there, paused on that angry moment. She hit delete without hesitation. I'm ashamed that even existed, she said. After the nurse left, Bill spoke again. I learned something today. I learned that the content of someone's character has nothing to do with what they look like. You showed me more kindness and courage than I've ever shown anyone. We'd like to make this right somehow, Martha added. Is there anything we can do? James thought for a moment. Just pass it forward. Next time you encounter someone different from you, remember this moment. Choose understanding over judgment. Dr. Chen returned with some papers. Mr. Reynolds, you'll need to stay here for a few days for observation. You'll also need to make some lifestyle changes, diet, exercise, stress management. And maybe some changes in how I see the world, Bill added quietly. James stood to leave. I should go. You need your rest. Wait, Bill called out. Would you come back? I'd like to thank you properly when I'm better. James smiled. I'll come by tomorrow to check on you. As he walked down the hospital corridor, James reflected on the day's events. He'd faced hostility and responded with humanity. He'd encountered hate and answered with help. In the parking lot, he noticed several people from the shopping center had gathered. Word had spread about what happened. They applauded as he approached his truck. We saw everything, one woman said. What you did was amazing. Not just the CPR, another added, but how you handled everything with such dignity. James thanked them but deflected the praise. Anyone with training would have done the same. But they knew better. They'd witnessed something more profound than just medical training. They'd seen someone choose compassion over conflict, service over self-righteousness. As James drove home, he thought about Bill and Martha. People could change, he believed. Sometimes it took a crisis to open their eyes, but change was possible. Today's events were proof of that. His phone buzzed with a text from his commanding officer. Heard about what happened. Proud of you for representing the Navy with honor. That's what true service looks like. James smiled. He hadn't thought about representing anyone but himself, but he realized his actions had spoken louder than any words could have. In choosing to help rather than hate, he'd shown what real strength looked like. The next morning, James woke up early and prepared to visit the hospital. As he was getting ready, his phone buzzed with several messages. Word had spread about yesterday's incident, and friends from his Navy unit were reaching out. Heard you saved someone's life yesterday. Classic James. Read one message. Way to show them what we're really about, said another. James arrived at the hospital around 10 a.m., carrying a small bouquet of flowers. He wasn't sure if it was appropriate, but his mother had always taught him to bring something when visiting someone in the hospital. When he reached Bill's room, he found it full of people. Martha was there, of course, but so were what appeared to be their children and grandchildren. The room fell silent as James entered. A younger woman, probably in her 30s, stepped forward. You must be James, she said, extending her hand. I'm Rachel, Bill and Martha's daughter. We all flew in as soon as we heard. Thank you for coming to check on him, she continued, her voice thick with emotion. Mom told us everything that happened. Bill was sitting up in bed, looking much better than yesterday. His color had returned, and his eyes were clear. James, he said, his voice stronger now. Please come in. The family made space for James near the bed. Bill reached for his hand. I need to tell you something in front of my family, he began. I need them to hear this too. Everyone listened intently as Bill continued. Yesterday, I showed the worst side of humanity. I let fear and ignorance guide my actions. But you, James, showed the best side. You had every right to walk away, but instead, you saved my life. Rachel spoke up. Dad's been struggling since he lost his job. He's been angry at everything and everyone, but what happened yesterday, it's changed him. It's changed all of us, Martha added. We've been talking all night about how we view the world, about the prejudices we didn't even realize we had. A young boy, maybe 10 years old, tapped on James's sleeve. Are you really a Navy SEAL? He asked with wide eyes. James smiled and knelt down to the boy's level. Yes, I am. My grandpa said mean things to you, but you still helped him. Why? The room went quiet, everyone waiting for James's answer. Because that's what good people do, James said simply. When someone needs help, you help them. It doesn't matter who they are or what they've said. Bill's eyes filled with tears. That's exactly the lesson we all needed to learn. Dr. Chen entered the room for morning rounds. Quite a crowd today, he observed with a smile. Mr. Reynolds, your tests look good. If everything continues improving, you could go home in a couple of days. Doctor, Bill said, can you tell my family what would have happened if James hadn't been there? Dr. Chen's expression grew serious. Without immediate CPR, Mr. Reynolds had maybe 4 minutes before permanent brain damage would have begun. James's quick action didn't just save his life, it preserved his quality of life. The family members looked at James with renewed appreciation. Rachel's husband stepped forward. We can never repay you for what you've done. There's no debt, James replied. But if you want to do something, maybe we can talk about making positive changes in our community. Martha's face lit up. We've been thinking about that. Bill and I want to volunteer at the community center, maybe help bridge gaps between different groups in our neighborhood. And I'm going back to church, Bill added, not just to warm a pew, but to really practice what they teach about loving your neighbor. The young boy tugged on James's sleeve again. Will you teach me how to be brave like you? James laughed gently. Being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing even when it's hard. And you know what? I think your grandpa showed some real bravery today by admitting he was wrong. That takes courage too. Bill nodded gratefully. I've got a lot to make up for. But I want to start by saying thank you, not just for saving my life, but for teaching me how to be a better person. As the visit wound down, Rachel pulled James aside. We're having a family dinner tomorrow night when Dad gets released. Would you join us? We'd like to start this new chapter of our lives with you there. James hesitated, surprised by the invitation. Are you sure? Please, Martha interjected, overhearing the conversation. It would mean everything to us. You're part of our family's story now, the part where we learn to be better. James accepted the invitation. As he was leaving, each family member hugged him or shook his hand. The young boy gave him a drawing he'd made, a figure in a Navy uniform with a big heart on the chest. Walking through the hospital lobby, James noticed people pointing and whispering. Some recognized him from videos of the incident that had been shared online. A few approached to shake his hand or express their admiration. But James didn't feel like a hero. He'd simply done what he'd been trained to do, what he believed anyone should do. The real victory, he thought, wasn't in saving Bill's life, it was in changing his heart. Outside the hospital, he saw a news van pulling up. Apparently, the story had gained more attention, but James quietly slipped away. This wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about human connection, about showing that compassion could overcome prejudice. As he drove home, James thought about the dinner invitation. A week ago, Bill and Martha would never have welcomed him into their home. Now they were calling him family. Sometimes, he realized, the most powerful changes happen in the most unexpected ways. By Monday morning, the story had spread far beyond their local community. News outlets had picked up on what happened, but not in the way Bill and Martha had originally intended when Martha was filming. Instead, the narrative focused on James's extraordinary response to hatred with life-saving compassion. James's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Local news stations wanted interviews, community organizations were reaching out, and even his commanding officer called again. "The Navy wants to recognize your actions," his CO said. "You've shown what our values truly mean." But James wasn't interested in the spotlight. "I appreciate it, sir, but I'd rather keep this low-key. It's not about recognition." Meanwhile, at the hospital, Bill was preparing for discharge. Dr. Chen gave him final instructions while Martha packed his belongings. "Remember, Mr. Reynolds, this is a second chance. Use it wisely." Bill nodded solemnly. "I intend to, Doctor. I've already made some plans." That evening, the Reynolds family gathered at their home for the dinner they'd invited James to. Martha had spent all day cooking, wanting everything to be perfect. Their house was filled with the aroma of roast chicken and freshly baked bread. When James arrived, he was surprised to see several cars in the driveway. "We invited a few neighbors too," Rachel explained as she welcomed him in. "People who witnessed what happened. They wanted to thank you as well." Inside, James found about 15 people waiting. Some he recognized from the parking lot incident. They applauded as he entered, making him slightly uncomfortable with the attention. Bill, now dressed in comfortable clothes rather than a hospital gown, stood up slowly from his armchair. "Before we eat," he announced, "I have something to say." The room fell quiet as Bill continued. 3 days ago, I was a different man. I carried anger and prejudice in my heart, and I let it poison my actions. But James here showed me what real strength looks like. It's not in hatred or judgment, it's in compassion and service. He turned to face James directly. "You didn't just save my life, you saved my soul. You showed me that the values I claim to hold, faith, family, community, mean nothing if they're not extended to everyone." Martha stepped forward with an envelope. "We know we can never repay what you did, but we wanted to do something meaningful." She handed the envelope to James. Inside was a letter announcing the creation of the Second Chances Scholarship Fund at the local community college, specifically for minority veterans pursuing education. The initial donation was substantial. Clearly, the Reynolds family had means they hadn't revealed before. "We liquidated some investments," Bill explained. It seemed like the right thing to do. James was speechless. He hadn't expected anything like this. "This is incredible," he managed to say. "There's more," Rachel added. She pulled out her laptop and showed James a website. "We've started a community initiative called Beyond First Impressions. Dad and Mom are going to lead workshops on overcoming prejudice and building understanding." The local pastor, who was among the invited guests, spoke up. "Bill called me yesterday. We're partnering with other faith communities to make this interfaith, interracial. It's going to bring real change to our town." As they sat down to dinner, the atmosphere was warm and welcoming. The young boy who had drawn the picture for James sat next to him, asking endless questions about being in the Navy. James answered patiently, enjoying the child's enthusiasm. Halfway through dinner, Martha's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and gasped. "The video, someone posted it online, but not the one I took. Someone else filmed everything, the whole incident and the rescue." They pulled up the video on a laptop. It had already been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. The comments section was filled with praise for James and discussions about prejudice and redemption. "This is what a real hero looks like," Rachel read from one comment, "not just saving a life, but changing hearts." Another neighbor, an elderly woman, shared her perspective. "I've lived here for 40 years. I've seen this community change, not always for the better. But what I witnessed in that parking lot gives me hope. It shows that change is possible, one person at a time. Bill raised his glass. To second chances, he toasted, and to the man who showed us that everyone deserves them. As the evening progressed, plans for the community initiative grew. Local business owners offered support, teachers volunteered to help with workshops, and young people suggested social media campaigns to spread the message. James watched it all unfold with quiet satisfaction. He hadn't sought to create a movement or change a community. He'd simply acted according to his training and values. But sometimes, the simplest acts of humanity could spark the biggest changes. Before leaving, Bill pulled James aside one more time. "I want you to know something," he said quietly. "Every day for the rest of my life, I'm going to work to be worthy of the second chance you gave me. And every time I see someone who looks different from me, I'm going to remember this moment and choose understanding over fear." James shook his hand firmly. "That's all any of us can do, choose to be better each day." As James drove home that night, he reflected on how a moment of crisis had transformed into an opportunity for growth. The parking lot confrontation could have ended in violence or deeper division. Instead, it had become a catalyst for positive change, rippling out through the entire community. 6 months later, the community center was packed for the first graduation ceremony of the Beyond First Impressions program. James sat in the front row as an honored guest, watching as Bill and Martha presented certificates to participants who had completed their workshops on understanding and overcoming prejudice. The transformation in Bill was remarkable. The angry man from the parking lot was gone, replaced by someone who spoke passionately about unity and acceptance. He had become a powerful advocate for change, sharing his story honestly and openly. "I stand here today because someone showed me mercy when I deserved none," Bill told the audience. "James Thompson didn't just save my life that day, he gave me a new purpose." The scholarship fund had already helped 12 veterans enroll in college courses. One of them, a young woman named Angela, spoke about how the opportunity had changed her life. "After serving overseas, I struggled to find my place back home. This scholarship didn't just pay for my classes, it showed me that my community values what I've done." Martha had started a weekly coffee meeting called Conversations That Matter, where people from different backgrounds gathered to share their stories. It had grown from 5 people to over 50 regular attendees. "We realized that most prejudice comes from not knowing each other," she explained to a local reporter. "When you sit down and really listen to someone's story, it's hard to hold on to hate." James had been invited to speak at the ceremony, but had initially declined. However, Bill insisted it wouldn't be complete without him. Standing at the podium, James kept his remarks simple and heartfelt. "What happened in that parking lot wasn't about me being a hero," he said. "It was about all of us recognizing that we have a choice in how we respond to difficult moments. We can let anger and fear guide us, or we can choose compassion and understanding." He paused, looking at Bill and Martha in the audience. "The real heroes are the people who have the courage to change, to admit when they're wrong, and to work every day to be better. That's what Bill and Martha have done, and that's what all of you are doing by being here." After the ceremony, the local mayor announced that the city council had unanimously voted to fund the program's expansion, that would be partnering with schools to bring the message of understanding and acceptance to young people. Rachel approached James with tears in her eyes. "My kids are growing up in a different world because of what you started," she said. "My son now tells everyone that his hero is the Navy SEAL who taught his grandpa about kindness." The young boy, now almost a year older, ran up to James with a big smile. "I'm learning CPR in school," he announced proudly. "I want to help people like you do." As the event wound down, James noticed a news crew interviewing participants. The story had evolved from a single incident to a movement. Other communities had started similar programs, inspired by what had happened here. Bill found James standing quietly by himself, observing the crowd. "You know," Bill said, "I used to think strength was about power, about dominance. You taught me that real strength is about lifting others up, not putting them down." "You taught yourself," James replied. "I just gave you a chance to see things differently." A young man approached them hesitantly. "Excuse me," he said to James. "I saw the video of what happened. I used to be like how Mr. Reynolds was, but seeing how you responded, it made me think. I signed up for the program because of you." Bill put his arm around the young man's shoulders. "Son, we all have room to grow. The important thing is that you're here, willing to learn." As the sun set, the community center slowly emptied. James walked to his truck, thinking about everything that had transpired since that fateful day. A moment of ugliness had been transformed into something beautiful, not through anger or revenge, but through patience, understanding, and the willingness to see the humanity in everyone. His phone buzzed with a message from his commanding officer. Saw the news coverage of today's event. "The Navy is proud, but more importantly, you've shown what one person's actions can do. You didn't just serve your country in uniform, you served it by being a decent human being when it mattered most." James smiled as he drove home. He had faced many challenges in his military career, but perhaps none more important than what happened in that parking lot. Sometimes the greatest battles weren't fought with weapons, but with compassion. And sometimes the most powerful victory was helping someone find their way from darkness to light. The scholarship fund continued to grow, the community program expanded to neighboring towns, and Bill and Martha became traveling speakers, sharing their story of transformation. But for James, the greatest reward was knowing that a single act of choosing kindness over conflict had created ripples of positive change that would continue long after that day in the parking lot. As he pulled into his driveway, James thought about the words he lived by throughout his service. "Leave things better than you found them." Today, looking back at everything that had grown from that difficult moment, he knew he had done exactly that.